This is all about Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things questions and markets related to Bitcoin, little b for the currency, and Bitcoin, big B for the network. A collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation, all Bitcoin, all the time. Let's have a live look right now at Bitcoin. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XBX index currently at $42,987. Bitcoin shooting up almost about 4.5% over the past 24 hours. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as the leader in crypto news, events, and data.
The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app.
Bitcoin is leading a rally in cryptocurrencies today, pushing the overall market capitalization back above the $2 trillion mark, a level last seen earlier this month before global markets slumped amid the war in Ukraine and tighter monetary policy in the West. Bitcoin continues to see major resistance, however, at about the 4,500 level, having fallen back from that level 4 times this year. It's been a volatile ride for Bitcoin, having initially stumbled yesterday after Fed Chair Jerome Powell's hawkish remarks indicated that the U.S. central bank will move aggressively to expedite 6 more rate hikes this year at about 0.25% each to curb runaway inflation. But recession fears and expectations of a Fed rate cut in 2023, coupled with renewed hopes of stronger institutional participation, are overshadowing Powell's comments. All right, let's take a look at some of the headlines out there. Billionaire investor Ray Dalio's Bridgewater Associates, with $150 billion in assets under management, is preparing to back its first crypto fund. Sources telling CoinDesk the world's largest hedge fund is planning to back an external vehicle and has no current intention of directly investing in crypto assets itself. Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs executing its first over-the-counter crypto transaction in the form of a Bitcoin non-deliverable option, or NDO, in partnership with New York-based crypto firm Galaxy Digital. Galaxy saying yesterday, quote, "This marks the first OTC crypto transaction by a major bank in the United States as Goldman Sachs continues expanding its cryptocurrency offerings, demonstrating the continued maturation and adoption of digital assets by banking institutions." And as Russian rubles going into crypto and stablecoins rise, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde is accusing service providers of becoming accomplices to circumventing Russia's sanctions. Nevertheless, blockchain analytics firm Chainalysis points out there is little evidence of this, as most transactions have been small in size, indicating use by ordinary Russian retail users and not a state treasury or Russian oligarchs. Lagarde, speaking at the Bank for International Settlements Innovation Summit, also expressed support for speeding up work on a potential digital euro. And finally, after a short-lived ban, a small town in upstate New York, Plattsburgh, to be specific, is still reckoning with crypto miners. As cities across the United States are grappling with what it means to have cryptocurrency mining operations in their communities, we turn to our CoinDesk U.S. regulatory reporter, Cheyenne Ligon, who has more on CoinDesk's Mining Week, which is a series of articles we're publishing on CoinDesk.com on mining. Hello there, Cheyenne. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Christine. How's it going?
So you actually had a very fun journey upstate, a drive, if you will, a couple hours north. And I suppose, walk us through why you went up there and what you saw.
Sure. So in March 2018, the city of Plattsburgh, it's a city near the Canada border. It has about 20,000 people living there. They decided to ban crypto mining after residents were complaining about their electricity bills going through the roof. So the moratorium was initially slated to last 18 months. They decided to cut it short at about 6 months after they passed something that was meant to keep the bills down. But it's a really interesting story because the issues that were happening in Plattsburgh had nothing to do with the environment, which is the concerns we're seeing outside of Plattsburgh. It was more to do with bills.
Okay. Yeah. So you met a lot of miners there and folks who were on the dissenting side saying, we don't want to pay more. So where does the balance lie?
That's what makes Plattsburgh a really interesting case story, I think. So The reason that the miners have gone to Plattsburgh is because the city has some of the cheapest power in the United States. And not only is it cheap, but it's pretty eco-friendly. It's all hydropower from the Niagara River. So it makes sense why the miners would want to be there. And the town has plenty of power to spare. So there's no inherent reason why the miners shouldn't be operating in Plattsburgh. But the problem is that they weren't being very good neighbors. They are pretty loud. They were causing some problems in the town. Most notably was the higher bills. So I think that the passage of this law called Rider A, which was meant to limit the amount that minor overages in power would affect ratepayers, like residential ratepayers, I think that that mostly addressed the problem, but it still didn't quite fix it. So it's a good case study of how the miners need to work with the communities that they're in to have a better relationship there.
When you say didn't quite fix it, do you mean to say that folks still found that their power bills were high, so maybe it didn't all have to be attributed to miners specifically?
Right. The Rider A was meant to keep any overage costs from going to residential ratepayers. And from talking to residents, we found that that is mostly true, but people's bills are still higher than they were before the miners moved in.
And so there are still folks trying to mine there, correct? So,
yes.
Or yeah. have they tried to amend the laws or to make it a little more flexible for them?
So the miners that are there, there's still about 3 mining operations there, the largest of which is CoinDesk, which has a 10 megawatt facility in town. And there's a couple other with 2 megawatt facilities. They have not necessarily tried to change the laws, but what we have seen is that they've said, okay, this is too much trouble for us. We're going to mostly pull out. So CoinDesk has a 80 megawatt facility in Messina, I believe, and a couple other throughout New York State, if I'm not mistaken, but they've only left a small portion of what they had in Plattsburgh.
And so, in your view, what is the sentiment felt by lawmakers in New York on crypto mining? We know that in New York City, at least, we have the new mayor, Eric Adams, who's very enthusiastic about crypto, wanting to make New York City a mining hub. Very difficult considering New York City is the home of the BitLicense, the notoriously difficult law that has forced a lot of crypto firms to leave New York. So what is the regulatory sentiment toward miners in general in New York?
For the most part, it's not great. Just today, actually, a New York State Assembly committee passed on a bill that's considering a 2-year moratorium on proof of work mining in New York State. Specifically, I think proof of work mining happening in former power plants, which would be like Greenwich Generation and a couple other of the big miners, as well as any miners hoping to move to New York and doing the same thing. And, that's gaining a lot of steam. I think people in the crypto industry are really worried that could stop mining from happening in New York.
All right, Viney. So, Cheyenne, I'm curious, what do you see as the future of mining in New York? Will it just continue to be in this deadlock between those few who really want to make it happen, though a wider populace who feels it doesn't really benefit them? So why should we have it at all?
I mean, I think we have to stay tuned to see what happens with this bill. But I think even if the bill doesn't get passed, miners are still going to run into the issues that they were seeing in Plattsburgh, where their relationship with the local communities could be way more of a hindrance than they expect. But do I think Bitcoin miners are going to leave? No. I mean, it's a great place for cheap and renewable power, which is something they care about. So I think a lot of them will be willing to jump through the hoops in New York to take advantage of that cheap power. But I think Plattsburgh is a good case study of issues that communities may have with the miners, and hopefully a learning example for future mining operations.
Excellent. Well, great report, Cheyenne. Thank you very much for our article. We also see that CoinDesk Doreen Wang was also able to go up there with you. She has a nice package of clips of your trip up there. So be sure to take a look at that. Thank you, Cheyenne, for joining us.
Thanks.
All right, that was CoinDesk US regulatory reporter Cheyenne Ligon. Coming up, we'll have some BTC price analysis with Dan Gunsberg of crypto options trading platform Hxro. All right, Bitcoin's on the up and up today, in the green, up 4.5%. Joining us now to discuss is Dan Gunsberg, co-founder and CEO of crypto options trading platform Hxro. Hello there, Dan. So earlier we spoke about some of the headlines in crypto right now. Do you have any thoughts on Goldman Sachs and Bridgewater? They're taking an active interest in Bitcoin. Are you seeing institutional interest pick up or anything of note?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that for, I know it's kind of discussed that the crypto market as a whole is kind of always questioning when, quote unquote, institutions will get here. I think we've been seeing it for pretty much over a year now. I think, especially with like Hxro Network, with the primitive that we're building, we've had quite a bit of what I would consider more professional trading firm and institutional interests coming in. And you're kind of seeing that crossover across the entire spectrum, from everything from macro hedge funds to now kind of stepping up into pure institutions more like Goldman Sachs and large hedge funds like Bridgewater. So very exciting to see, and I think that we're going to continue to see this throughout the year.
Is that your sense of why we're seeing a bit of a price bump today, or what do you think are some of the underlying factors? I mean, Bitcoin has just been very volatile lately, so it could be anything.
Yeah, volatile in a relative sense to recent, but really kind of stuck in a range. I think that you've had a few different points. You've had this announcement a couple of weeks ago by Terra Luna CEO Do Kwon, saying that their treasury reserves of Luna would be purchasing $10 billion worth of Bitcoin. They just announced yesterday they made their first purchase of $125 million worth. I think things like this historically, like news like this, is not really a long-term driver of Bitcoin price. It generally has these kind of short-term positive effects. We're kind of coming off the bottom of the range, which really, we kind of really traded in between from the low 30s into getting up to 45,000, and we've really been stuck there since the beginning of the year. So while I think there's some of these short-term effects, I don't necessarily see anything just yet that's pointing to a real catalyst to get us broken out of this range that we've been in since January. One thing that I generally try to watch closely is the Bitcoin basis, which is really the relationship of spot price to Bitcoin, to the price of Bitcoin, like the market's current assessment of the value of Bitcoin at some point in the future, which is really expressed through Bitcoin futures. So the basis also gives you an indication of what the market is willing to pay to actually borrow Bitcoin, because there is an implied interest rate there, or carry rate.
What is that level at right now?
It's a few days ago, it was somewhere around 4.5%, and it's kind of upticked to a little over 5%, which, just to kind of frame it on a relative basis, when we were kind of in the throes of the rallies into late summer last year and getting towards the end of the year, you were seeing rates of annualized rates of basis going out to well over 100%. So the appetite to borrow at that time was extremely high. And when you see these bigger moves in Bitcoin, a lot of what drives it ends up being some initial catalyst, but there's also a good amount of leverage, albeit responsible leverage, being put into the market. And people's appetite to borrow goes up dramatically, and that usually gets presented in the basis, and it is a very strong signal to kind of tell you if a move is coming or not.
In terms of options activity, yesterday CoinDesk reported that the dollar value locked in Bitcoin futures contracts open on the CME exited the downtrend. And I wonder what kind of trends you're paying attention to, what kind of trader activity you're seeing, and how they're placing their positions.
Yeah, a lot of really what we're seeing again is really based around this technical range. I'm seeing a lot of call buying activity as things come lower, which is generally like a when Bitcoin goes lower, which is kind of the inverse of what happens in, say, equity markets, you generally start to see kind of a dampening of volatility, and the volatility risk of Bitcoin is generally priced to the upside. So as we come down into the bottom of the range, you start to see a lot of call buying activity. And then when you start getting the upper ends of the range, you get a little bump in volatility, which obviously is a positive effect for premium in Bitcoin options. And then you start to see that being sold back out or reversed. But other than that, I'm not seeing too much the way of anything being planned for a large move one way or the other anytime in the future. And then at least.
And what's that range of support and resistance?
So right now, being priced somewhere between 37,000 on the low end and 45,000 on the high end. So pretty tight.
All right, some sideways trading ahead. Thank you, Dan, for your analysis. Appreciate you for coming on. That was Hxro CEO Dan Gunsberg. All right, that's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and we'll do it all over again at 3 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow. Also join us tomorrow morning for First Mover at 9 a.m. Eastern. You're watching CoinDesk TV.